the idea that Ukraine might join a Western military alliance would be quite unacceptable to any Russian leader. This goes back to 1990, when the Soviet Union collapsed. There was a question as to what would happen with NATO. Gorbachev agreed to allow Germany to be unified and to join NATO. It's a pretty remarkable concession, with a quid pro quo that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. That was the phrase that was used.
So Russia has been provoked?
Well, what happened? NATO instantly moved to East Germany. Then Clinton came along, expanded NATO right to the borders of Russia. Now there are the new Ukrainian government, the government after the overthrow of the preceding one, the parliament voted, I think 300 to 8 or something like that, to move to join NATO.
Which you can understand why they would want to join NATO. You can see why Petro Poroshenko's government would probably see that it's protecting his country.
No, it's not protect. Crimea was taken away after the overthrow of the government, right? And he's not protecting Ukraine, is threatening Ukraine with major war. That's not protection. The point is, this is a serious strategic threat to Russia, which any Russian leader would have to react to. That's well understood.
On Putin, Dugin, and Ukraine. And Alexander Dugin is, of course, the Russian philosopher. He is both Putin's primary geopolitical strategist and also his primary metaphysician. He's both. Russia is still in its early springtime phase of deep religiosity, and that's what this essay is about. I'm a little tired of hearing the ignorant media yap on and on about very shallow matters regarding this conflict. There's a lot more going on than just an attempt to keep Ukraine out of NATO. So what I'll do here is read the first few paragraphs. The Russian philosopher Alexander Dugin was asked in 2008, how does Russia view the development of friendly relations between the United States and former Soviet republics, such as Ukraine and Georgia? He replied, as a declaration of war, as a declaration of psychological, geopolitical, economic, and open war. And so we have war in Ukraine, which as of this writing is in its 7th day. And the reason is because Dugin is Vladimir Putin's primary geopolitical advisor. Dugin has been an advisor for the Russian military since the late 90s when his book Foundations of Geopolitics was published. In that book, Dugin revived an early 20th century Russian philosophy known as Eurasianism, which he now calls Neo-Eurasianism. When Putin became president of the Russian Federation in 2000, he wholeheartedly embraced Dugin's vision just a year later, and so it has been his primary vision ever since. Dugin provides the metaphysics and the geopolitical ideas, and Putin, with a very powerful war apparatus at his disposal, implements that vision on the plane of physical reality. And so now the question becomes, what is that vision? Eurasianism asserts that the unipolar vision of the West, namely that its worldview is the only correct one and that all other societies on the planet must submit to it, is just dead wrong. Dugin insists on a multipolar world and that Russia absolutely is not and never was European. Russia has its own unique identity, its own values, its own religion, its own metaphysics, and they are not those of Western liberalism.
They're only hitting military targets, and they are relentless in hitting the military targets, but always with a certain degree of caution. They are avoiding civilian populations and civilian infrastructure. And when they go to a city or a destination, when they encounter any resistance from the Ukrainian army, any serious resistance, they stop and pull back. Because what are they doing? They are encircling. And so the Russians are systematically surrounding all of the major cities. And whenever they come across a smaller town or village, they just advance and cover it and capture it and move on and continue with their advance. For all intents and purposes, the Russian army is tiptoeing into Ukraine. Insofar as air power is concerned, the Russians in the first 3 hours wiped the Ukrainian skies of everything that has the goal of capturing intact Ukraine and the Ukrainian army, because the Russians realize that once they have captured Ukraine, and change the political leadership, they will need an army to protect and look after the Ukrainian state and the Ukrainian people and the Ukrainian land. They don't want to destroy the Ukrainian army. They could do that if they wanted to. They would have done that already. They own the skies. The current Ukrainian leadership in the military, the generals in Ukraine, they went to military academies with the generals of the Russian army. They're drinking buddies since when they were back in like 18-year-old, 19-year-old plebes. And understand that you in the West, you are being goaded into thinking that Putin and the Russians are like evil Antichrist. You don't understand why the Russians are invading. And your political leadership, Boris Johnson, Joe Biden, all these people, they don't want you to understand. Of course not. They want you to just demonize, just to take the easy way out. They want you to imagine that this is a Marvel comic book movie and that, there are white hats and black hats, good guys and bad guys. Yeah, we got to kill the bad guys because we're the good guys. Yeah. The Russians don't want to harm Ukraine. They would have destroyed Ukraine if they wanted to. What really bothers me, and perhaps this isn't a wise thing for me to say while I'm still in Ukraine under the Zelensky regime. What really bothers me is that the Zelensky regime has no trouble causing a humanitarian crisis. In fact, they welcome a humanitarian crisis. They would love to see dead Ukrainians. And I know this for a fact. And do you know how I know this for a fact? Because the Zelensky government has been handing out AK-47s willy-nilly to the civilian population. As I understand it, they've already handed out 10,000 AK-47s and munitions to match. Now, you see, if you've never had any kind of military experience, you, with a weapon like that, you can become extremely dangerous to all the people around you and to yourself. It takes training to operate a firearm. You have to know what you're doing. It's not a casual thing, okay? It's not like in the movies. It's very, very dangerous, and you can harm yourself. They want to foment the people to fight the war against the Russians. And the thing is, see, the Russians have professional soldiers. Now, these professional soldiers, they carry a weapon. They know what to do with the weapon. And if they see somebody armed, be it a man in a uniform or just a civilian with an AK-47, well, they're going to shoot him, okay? And so that civilian will be dead, and that will present a great photo op now, won't it? So that Zelensky can wrangle some European country or the Americans or whomever to come in and get involved in this war and potentially escalate the situation to levels that are unimaginable. The Zelensky regime is doing something frankly evil, because it is evil to put civilians, to encourage civilians to do something that incredibly dangerous and irresponsible. The Zelensky regime has also put heavy weaponry in civilian population centers. You're going to have Russians shelling apartment complexes, killing innocent civilians. The Zelensky regime is putting these weapons in the middle of populated areas precisely because they want to have this happen.